Доброго дня, шановні студенти. Сьогодні ми маємо високу честь вітати в нашій залі астронавта НАСА Рендольфа Брезніка. Прошу вітати. Звичайно, ви познайомилися в інтернеті з біографією, з життєвим шляхом Рендольфа Брезніка, але скажу тільки дві речі. Рендольф Брезнік двічі побував в космосі. Перший раз він вийшов в космос, при цьому виходив в космос, перший раз на 11 годин 50 хвилин, другий раз, коли він був з 28 липня по 14 грудня 2017 року, була здійснена друга місія, і вже тоді він в космосі, в відкритому космосі перебував 20 годин 10 хвилин. Ним був зроблений безпосередній великий внесок в підкорення космосу, в проведення досліджень, про що Рендольф розповість в своїй лекції і в нашому спілкуванні. Для нас дуже важливо те, що Рендольф – великий друг України. Під час перебування в космосі він в 2017 році він провів скайп-конференцію з українською спільнотою, яка зібралася в американському домі в Києві. Тоді він це робив під двома прапорами – американським і українським. Для нас дуже також важливо, що Рендольф Брезнік разом з дружиною Ребекою у 2008 році усиновили українського хлопчика. І зараз син Рендольфа тут з нами, його звати Вайет. Прошу, Вайет, також підніміться. Отака видатна людина сьогодні з нами. Randolph, the floor is yours. Please start your lecture.
Привет, доброе утро. Извините, я говорю плохо по-русски, so я использую по-английски. Thank you for coming this morning. It's wonderful to see so many young people here studying at this institute, working towards the future of Ukraine. And hopefully, by the end of today's lecture, you'll be even more motivated in your studies. Here's a picture I took just a few months ago of your beautiful city here in Kyiv. And it's amazing what you can see from this picture. I'm sure that the Institute is in this picture, and I have a copy for you at the end. When I was in the university, I never thought that this might be possible. It was something I dreamed about, something I found fascinating, something I would go to museums and look at the old airplanes and rocket ships and capsules that people had flown into space and dreamed about it, but it never seemed possible. But I became a pilot of F-18s, and then I became a lotnik ispitatel, a test pilot, and I flew everything that I could get my hands on because I thought flying was so interesting and the history of flying. And so it was wonderful being able to tour your aviation museum and see the contributions of this institution to aviation history. But unfortunately, none of my airplanes could ever reach orbital velocities. So I had to become an astronaut. And I had a chance to fly in space for the first time in 2009 aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis. I had 5 other crewmates, and we launched out of the Kennedy Space Center. This is the cockpit of the Atlantis, and our job was to work on finishing the construction of the International Space Station. On that mission, I was fortunate enough to do 2 VKDs, or 2 spacewalks. But we also realized that space is a very unique environment. It is very harsh on the human body. It's also unlike any experience you've ever had here on Earth. So we are using extreme environments on Earth to try and prepare astronauts and cosmonauts for the space environment. One of the areas we use is the underground caves. Because the caves always are in darkness, you never know what time of day it is, just like on the space station where the sun is going up and down every 45 minutes as you go around the Earth. The caves have real danger. There's a chance of injury, and so you have to be very careful with your equipment and the protocols to maintain your safety as you attach your tethers and as you climb ropes and as you descend ropes. As you can see, here is an environment that probably none of you have ever slept in, but this is 1.5 kilometers from the mouth of the cave was where our base camp was, and those are our tents in the huge cave larger than the size of this room. It was a completely foreign environment that we had a Russian cosmonaut, a Japanese astronaut, a French and British astronauts, and myself. We also used the extreme environment underwater to prepare the astronauts and cosmonauts for spaceflight. It's hard hat diving, where we are actually living underwater in the only underwater habitat anywhere in the world off the coast of Florida. It's called Aquarius. It's 20 meters below the ocean. And again, we're living in an environment that is dangerous. Because we are doing saturation diving, you can't, if you have a problem when you're outside, you can't go to the surface because that will kill you. You have to get back in your habitat. You have to rely on your partner to help you get back, or rely on the safety equipment, just like we do in space. So we use these extreme environments so that the first time someone goes to space, it's not the first time their body and their mind and their vision is assaulted with very strange things. In the case of doing both of these exercises, when you go to space, it's now just the third strange thing, and hopefully the gap between somebody's earthly living and space living is a little bit smaller. Then I got assigned to a mission for MKS, the International Space Station, and we started out with winter survival training out in Star City outside of Moscow, where we had to survive for 3 days and 2 nights with just the equipment and the clothing that were inside of our Soyuz. Then we did our water survival training, which fortunately was not in the winter. And we learned to be able to change inside of the Soyuz from our scaphanders, our pressure suits, into our survival equipment. And as you can see, the Soyuz is only this big, and actually my arms were a little bent. And if you can imagine 3 grown men inside the Soyuz, getting out of their spacesuits, getting into their survival equipment, we were very close. And I learned things about my crewmates Sergei Ryazanskiy and Paolo Nespoli that I hope to forget someday. Это шутка. We train also for our spacewalks. We put on the spacesuits, we attach all our equipment, just like we would in space, and we practice in what is the world's largest swimming pool, called the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory in Houston, Texas. It's 6 million gallons of water, and it has the entire space station inside underwater, so that when we practice our spacewalks, we get muscle memory of where to reach for the handrails, what connections we have to make for the electrical, or the ammonia, or the other systems, or the repairs that we're doing on equipment or assembly of parts of the space station. Then once our exams were complete, as part of our tradition, the crew would go to Red Square, and outside the wall of the Kremlin are the graves of Sergei Korolyov, one of your graduates, where we lay flowers on his grave. We also lay flowers on the grave of Yuri Gagarin, the first human being in space. And then we go down to Baikonur for our final fit checks. It's finally not a training Soyuz, it's our Soyuz that we're going to take to space. And we're wearing our suits that'll take us to space, and the equipment that'll be with us is inside, and we finally get a chance to get inside and see where it all is and make sure we understand it for its use after our launch. Then they take the Soyuz and they put it in its fairing to protect it as we go through the atmosphere. They put it on the rail car and take it out to the launch pad. And it ends up we are launching out of the same launch pad in Baikonur that Yuri Gagarin launched out of. That was an amazing piece of history for me. And this is what it looks like. I think this is an amazing piece of engineering to take the rocket from the horizontal position to put it in the launch position. Not very much room up here as it gets put into the launch pad. And then finally, it's launch day. This was the 28th of July, just last year, where the three of us launched to the International Space Station. It was very, very smooth compared to the shuttle. And here's, you see the engines. We've lost the first stage, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces glittering in the video. That is known as the Korolyov Cross. And it's pretty rare that you're able to see that this well from the video. It was a nighttime launch, and it was very beautiful. And then, only 4 orbits, or 6 hours later, we were actually having Stikovka, the rendezvous with the space station. For us, we had been awake for about 23 hours, so it was a very long day. And you can imagine when you're up late studying for your exams, you got to go in and take the test. Here we are, the most important part, actually docking with the space station at the end of our day, so we really had to concentrate. We joined the crew of Expedition 52, which had Fyodor Yurchikhin, Peggy Whitson, and Jack Fisher. Peggy Whitson left space station at the end of the expedition with 665 days in space total in her life. Fyodor Yurchikhin, 673. So a huge amount of space experience between just those two cosmonauts and astronauts. Then, when they left, we had a new crew join us, and Sasha Misurkin, Mark Vandehei, and Joe Acaba. And we started Expedition 53, which would be about 3.5 months of our time up in orbit. Moving around in space is fun. You walk with your hands, and your hands are your feet, really. And so your feet are your hands, and you carry stuff with your feet when you move around. And if there wasn't small hatchways, I would have just kept on going. But we're up there to do a lot of science and research. We're doing robotics with students in universities, programming the robotics and having them fly in zero gravity. We do microbiology. We do cell research. It's interesting to have stuff in zero gravity and have the researchers find out how it behaves. This is a combustion experiment that Paolo is working on. And we also do a lot of outreach, talking to students in their schools. We did outreach speaking with students here in Kyiv in October. And to give you an example, and I see some younger people in here, we'll show you an example of what it's like to see Newton's second law in action. Laws of physics will hold up. Come on, let's go find out.
The acceleration of an object depends on the net force acting on the object and the mass of the object, or F equals ma.
Jolly good show, Sir Isaac.
Here we see that once the force of the thrust is greater than the weight of the vehicle, the rocket begins to accelerate.
All right, we're going to start with something small, something you might have at home. A little stick of chapstick. We'll go ahead and use our force, being our bungee cord here. We'll put it on our bungee, and we'll pull it back, and let it go. And you can see how fast it accelerates because there's very little mass. Next, we'll try a little spaceship. A little more massive, and you can feel that because as you move it, you can feel that the kind of the force, the extra force you have to push with your hand. So we'll put our spaceship on our launcher here, same spot. Notice it's flying a lot slower than that chapstick did. What we've seen is the same amount of force on a smaller less massive object means the acceleration is faster. Well, this is the biggest and most massive thing we have, so let's see how the acceleration is affected. Pull back the same amount on the force, and here we go. And there you have it, Newton's second law of motion in action. Thanks everybody for exploring a little physics with me today. Now I'm going to send it back to Earth so you can start your experiments. See you again real soon. So hopefully that was interesting for you to understand and physically see what that F equals ma means. We have to clean up on station. We have to, every week we have to vacuum and wipe down the space station to keep it in good shape. We have to do repairs and modify it. Here I am modifying the front part of the space station so that the new crewed vehicles that the SpaceX company and the Boeing company are building conduct to the space station, and we can provide them ventilation air. We also have to do a lot of exercise. The human body deteriorates in zero gravity because our muscles are not required to work. As the muscles atrophy and get smaller, they put less tension on our bones. And then our bones lose density and get more brittle, kind of like an older person that has osteoporosis. So we end up doing a lot of working out every day on space station. You've got Sasha Mashirkin running on the treadmill here. That's on the forward wall. So that'd be as if Sasha was running this direction from the front wall. And you've got Sergei Ryazanskiy back here on the resistive exercise device. Notice his feet are here and Sasha's are here. So Sergei's would actually be working out on that back wall. And then here in the middle is the toilet. And so if somebody were to come in to use that, they'd actually be vertical like we're standing right now. And so as you can see in space, all the surfaces are usable, and it makes for really efficient use, and it makes places seem a lot bigger than they are down here on Earth. We had a lot of cargo vehicles come up and join us. They brought the scientific experiments, they brought food, they brought clothing, they also brought packages of stuff for us. We had the Dragon, the Cygnus, as well as the Progress vehicle. And they brought us all kinds of neat stuff, packages from So it's really fun, the fact that something simple like that, the toy that my children picked out when we were in the store, can demonstrate physics and how gyroscopes work in space and just how stable they can be. That it was time for us to do VKD, to do our 3 spacewalks. You can see right here, this is the astronaut in the scaphandra for the VKD. And below us is 400 kilometers of nothing. And as you can imagine, if we were all to go to the top of this building and go over to the edge of it and stand on the edge and lean over, our bodies would automatically tell us, our blood vessels would start constricting and tell us to lean back because it's not safe. I'm going to fall if I lean over. Well, you have the same feeling when you go outside on a spacewalk. Here's a video, it's a GoPro video as we're going out the hatch for a spacewalk. You come out upside down, and then you have to attach your tethers onto the airlock on the outside and start working. You have to tell your body to calm down and relax from this natural reaction you have to having nothing below you. Here's Mark Vande Hei working on a camera, and he's actually riding on the robotic arm where we could fly him around. And here is the same time Sergei Rosansky took this picture. Here's Mark Vande Hei right there. You can see how big the space station is. Parts built all over the world, assembled for the first time in orbit. And this is only half of the space station. There's an exact same mirror side on the right side that you don't see in the view. And here's another bit of GoPro where I'm just standing there, and you can see, once it steadies out, how fast the Earth is moving underneath us. We're going around the Earth every 90 minutes. So that means that we are moving at 10 kilometers every second. We're human beings too. We end up having to work where we live, and so we would take breaks. And Friday night we would have dinner in the Russian segment. Saturday nights would be dinner in the US segment. This was our Dien Благодарен in November, where we had our food that we rehydrated. We had fresh lettuce that we grew on the space station. We had lobster and caviar in the cans. And of course, we had our candlelight dinner that we printed out on our printer. And then we had pizza night. They sent it up on our Cygnus cargo vehicle. And notice our table has Velcro and tape so that things don't float off the table. And you can see us using scissors to cut our pizza. Flying saucers that we could eat. And then Saturday nights, to get away from all the work and everything else we were doing, we'd always get together and we'd watch a movie. And the only reason that we're not floating off is you can see these lines right here. We stretched bungee cords across the hatch so we could tuck our arms and our legs in and not float away while we were watching the movie. We saw movies like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and we saw Blade Runner while we were up there. But we also took a lot of photography. It was the #1 thing that everybody enjoyed doing the most. The Earth is amazingly beautiful, and it's different every time you go around it because the weather's changed. We saw the solar eclipse. We saw far too many hurricanes while we were up there and what they do to Earth once they pass through. This is Turks and Caicos. Wildfires from space. There were fires in Moldavia. This is Southern California that we were able to see the fires from. But we've preferred taking pictures of just the beauty of our planet. The wide variety of colors and terrain and textures that the Earth has. We could even see man-made things from space, but we mostly appreciated the natural beauty of the planet. This is the Himalayas, and this little bump right here is Mount Everest. And you can imagine, it's like trying to find one hair on your head, trying to find one mountain from 400 kilometers high in the Himalayas. It was a challenge. I like the night photography a lot. This is the Nile River, Cairo, and Israel. And you can see what the horizon looks like just before a sunrise. This is Bangkok, a city of 16 million people. And this is just one thunderstorm flash of lightning. And you can see how big that is compared to the size of a city of 16 million people. And all of these dots and all of these dots are individual fishing boats and the lights that they use to attract the squid. That's a huge amount, and you can see an individual boat from space. This is the city of Seoul, Korea. And with the new cameras that we got in November, Nikon D5s, the latest technology, all of a sudden we instead of having to have a tripod to shoot pictures at night so the camera was stable, we could actually shoot pictures at night of cities like this by doing it handheld, as if we were shooting during daylight. It was amazing that improvement in technology. And that's what we keep doing on the space station, whether it is space station systems or environmental control, life control systems that allow us to reclaim our water or create oxygen from the water we have. Even something as simple as our cameras continue to evolve. But we're also, I can't see it so well because of the lighting here, but here's Seoul, Korea, and there's a red line that goes along right here. And that is the border between North and South Korea. And if you look up top here, there's absolutely no lights at all in North Korea. We preferred the natural light. We saw northern lights, southern lights. The auroras moved and danced across the sky. It was beautiful to behold. And even sometimes just taking pictures of the stars that were out there was something that was enjoyable, and seeing the Milky Way. We had some other special things that we saw from space. Here is a picture a little further out of Kyiv. That's the picture that I showed you earlier. And then we had a project where it was called hashtag was One World, Many Views, where pictures from about 80 places all over the world that I had taken here on the Earth, I found those places and took their picture from space. And so they were both posted like this, with the picture from space, the picture from the ground. The hope was that the people from Kyiv would see that picture of your hometown and be amazed at how beautiful it is. And that people not from Kyiv would see how beautiful Kyiv is from space and how beautiful Kyiv is from the ground, and maybe they'll want to come here and come meet with you and make the world a little smaller that way. We also had a beautiful Ukrainian flag that we had taken to space. And we had gotten that here. We had actually purchased it in Dnipropetrovsk 2 years ago when we were there in honor of my son who is from there. And our world is an amazingly beautiful place. It's really hard to describe it to people, but we try. I've shown you a few pictures, but Sergey and Paul and I really wanted to try and make something that could give you as much as we could the impression of what it's like to be able to see Earth from that vantage point. Unfortunately, so far in all of humanity, there's been only a little over 550 people who have ever been able to see the beauty of our planet from that vantage point. Our hope is that the work we do now will allow future generations to be able to have maybe 550 people a day going to space. That is our hope. So until then, we put together a special video with some music that'll hopefully give you a feeling and a sense as close as we can get it to what it's like to be in space.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When of silence, and in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never share, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fool said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning, and the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words on the prophets are written on the subway walls, in tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence.
Very, very happy that you enjoyed that. That was our special gift to all of you, in hopes that many of these young people here will think about maybe flying into space or working on the things that allow us to get to space. And someday, instead of spending a bunch of money to go down to Euro Disney or go down to Odessa for a vacation, you'll decide to go to space, and it'll be that easy to do that. All of these videos and pictures you saw, that's just a small amount of what we did during the expedition. So if you are interested in any of this stuff or any of the instructors, there's instructional videos. They're all available on social media to go get. So at this point, I believe, do we have time for questions? Okay. We have some time to be able to take some questions. So if anyone has a question, please. Young lady in the back. Oh yes, there's the microphone in the middle. If you could just please come up to the microphone. So anyone would like to ask a question, if you just want to make a line направо, on the right.
Thank you for your speech. It was very interesting and amazing. I'm interested in your biography a little bit, and I know that your daughter was born while you was in orbit. Please, can you tell me about your emotions in this time? You were sad or happy, for example? I don't know. Thank you.
That is a great question, because astronauts and cosmonauts, and just like your Ukrainian astronaut, we're all just people. We are no different than you. We're biologically the same. We have the same, troubles. We have the same concerns. We have the same feelings. And so I'm sure that a lot of you who are parents here could understand how difficult it would be to not be there for the birth of your child. The launch day that I showed you in November 16th of 2009, I wasn't scared at all launching into space aboard a rocket filled with liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen that was going to try and, light off and launch me to space. I was concerned because my wife was only 5 kilometers away, 9 months pregnant with our daughter. And once the solid rocket boosters lit off and we started moving, I knew at that point I wasn't going to be there. And my wife did too. And she's an amazing woman who came back, and with the help of her sister, she gave birth to our daughter midway through the mission. Our daughter we had 3 spacewalks on the flight. And I was inside as the choreographer, or the person reading out the procedures to the 2 guys outside. Well, our daughter, the doctors planned to have her born before the second spacewalk, my first one. They started the delivery, and my wife went into labor, but my daughter was not born. So I woke up the morning for my very first spacewalk, the pinnacle of my professional career as a pilot and an astronaut, and my wife's in labor. And so I'm sure, as you can imagine, you guys, when you have not 1, but maybe 2 exams in the same day, you finish that first exam, you have to leave that and concentrate on the next thing. I had to get into my spacesuit and go outside and concentrate only on that spacewalk and put out of my mind the fact that my wife was in labor. I completely expected that when I came back inside, I would be told that, my wife had given birth. She still had not given birth. So here I am, exhausted from the spacewalk, trying to call her, find out, how things are going. It turns out my daughter was born about 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, while we were sleeping. And I had gone to sleep. I wake up and they're playing a song on the radio for the shuttle crew that was called Butterfly Kisses, and that was the code that my daughter had been born. And so I waited all day long between our 2 spacewalks to see pictures, and finally in the afternoon I got to see pictures of my daughter for the first time. I got to see video and do a video conference with them and hear her little voice. And even after having done the spacewalk, where the views are even more amazing than what I've shown you from looking out the windows, it was more beautiful seeing my daughter for the first time. And I'm sure all of you parents would say the same thing. And that even if you never go to space, there's something better here on Earth, and that's seeing your child for the first time. And literally, as soon as I hung up the video conference with my wife, I had to go float over to the airlock where we closed the hatch, and we depressurized the airlock to 10.2 pounds per square inch to denitrogenate our bodies while we slept overnight. And the very next day, I was out on my second spacewalk, where I'm the lead spacewalker now, having to put all that out of my mind to be able to go do the next spacewalk. And so you'll find, especially as students and then later in life, you really have to learn to compartmentalize and separate things and keep them in their place, and not let other events or things that you're thinking get in the way of what's going on right here and now. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you for your very inspirational presentation. Would you tell a little more about your biological experiments? You are not a biologist, yeah, and how it's difficult for you or interesting? Thank you.
Great question. While the space station is this orbiting laboratory that human beings have never, had the size and scope of before, we're not actually up there with, vials and mixing chemicals to come up with new compounds, or making up new metals. We are executing researchers' projects up on orbit. And so the researchers from institutes like this around the world create the experiments, build the experiments, and then send them up. And what we do is we execute the science that they have imagined. And so we assemble it if we need to. We go ahead and provide the changes to it as necessary. We provide the camera views so that they can get the data that they need down here on the ground. And we have everything from combustion experiments, where we are burning fuel at not 1200 degrees, but 800 degrees. We call it cool flames. And hopefully that type of technology will allow us to build safer airplanes, more fuel-efficient airplanes. If we have our lung tissue experiment we were doing is creating more perfectly grown lung tissues that is part of a cancer experiment where the cancer cells, where the antidote is actually seeking out cancer cells to destroy just the cancer cells, not all the cells like this chemotherapy does now. We grew lettuce. How can we sustain ourselves on long duration missions we have to take a room like this full of food to last till we get to Mars when we can grow it with seeds on our space vehicle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your inspiring speech. I've got two questions. First one, if you got to choose your next spaceship to travel to ESS, will you choose Crew Dragon, Starliner, or the Soyuz again? And the second question is, what, in your opinion, spaceship of the 21st century should look like?
Great question. Because right now it is a period for both the United States, Russia, and other countries are building new vehicles. And it's been a while since that's happened. I've been fortunate enough to fly on Shuttle and Soyuz, so I would choose to fly as a test pilot, something different. And so the Crew Dragon or the Boeing Starliner would be happy to fly either one of those. But we also have a new vehicle in the US called the Orion. And the Orion is not supposed to go to the space station or low Earth orbit. It's supposed to do missions that go to the moon and take us to the new Deep Space Gateway or space station in the moon area. And so that would be another great option to fly. I think when we talk about design of 21st century vehicles, we found out with Space Shuttle, it was a great design and very versatile, but it had limiting factors, meaning the heat shield was always exposed, and that caused some accidents for us. The capsule design is very safe. The heat shield is never exposed until the service modules separate just moments before re-entry, so it can't ever get damaged. So it's a much inherently safer design. So I think going in and out of the atmosphere, it's kind of smart to stay with a small, simple capsule. But the vehicles we build to go to the Mars will be sent up in pieces and assembled kind of like the space station was, maybe in lunar orbit or the Lagrange point where the gravity is equal between the Earth and the moon. That way it'll take that much less propellant to get the vehicle started on its journey to Mars, and maybe we can burn longer and therefore get there faster.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Artem Nikolenko, NGO Student Republic. I want to ask, we just returned from our project, Winter Student Republic, where we discussed about a global project for the world, what we can make for all world. So my question is, in your mind, you travel to space from NASA, from government agency, and now we have global commercial corporation of Elon Musk, Tesla, and others that make a space program. In your mind, what is the future of space, or space fare, or space traveling? It should be a commercial sphere, or it should be a national sphere. And next question. It should be a sphere of all, of some government, of some nations, or it should be legacy of all world? Thank you.
Great question. The low Earth orbit has only been, manned missions have only been governments, nationalities, that have sent people there so far. With the space station, we now have commercial companies. We've had the Orbital ATK company, the SpaceX company send up cargo vehicles. So that was kind of the first type of working a government and commercial partnership. Now the Crew Dragon and the Boeing Starliner are the next step of creating now manned missions that are commercially based. The hope is that those companies will be able to not only take astronauts and cosmonauts to the space station, that there will now then be a commercial space station, whether that is a transformation of the International Space Station or individually built ones like the Bigelow company wants to do with their inflatable space habitats. I hope that right now is like we were in maybe 1910 or 1915 with aviation, where we had an original design and a few people were doing it, and then all of a sudden it blossomed. I saw in your museum what you guys were doing here in Ukraine in 1906. And look at where we are now, just over 100 years later, where we have airliners made of composite materials flying around the world, on single tank of gas. And everybody thinks it's normal just to go to the airport, hop on a plane, and fly somewhere. My hope is that in another less than 50, 100 years, that's what spaceflight is like. And we'll be able to do that because of the commercial companies being able to grow the industry without the government having to be involved. That will allow, at least on the United States side, we envision it as this partnership and getting them started will allow us to take the big government might do the harder things that the companies don't have a business case for. We're building a moon station, kind of hard to build a business case and make money for shareholders. And so that's where the taxpayer money, the government money will have to go to do these far-on projects. And because of the way the cost and the complexity of going to Mars is, that'll have to be an international group. I don't see how any one country can do that alone. And so that's where the International Space Station hopefully is a good example of how, no matter what is going on at political levels, at the engineer and working and operational level, for missions that we're doing as a species of humans, that we can cooperate to go ahead and do Mars together. Спасибо.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Bresnik. Could you tell anything about space colonization? For example, your thoughts on how long should we wait to colonize Mars or Moon or anything in the solar system, for example?
I don't think we should wait at all. I mean, the work we're doing right now is as fast a pace as we can do it, based with the money that we are allowed to work with. So every space agency around the world is only given a certain amount of money for their budget from the government. What it takes is people who are the voters who have the money, to tell their politicians, we want to get there quicker, we want to do it faster, and therefore allocate more money towards the research and the development of those capabilities. Mars, we're finding the fact that we think there's water there. With water, we can go ahead and separate that and make the hydrogen for the fuel for our rockets to come home. We can collect the oxygen for the humans to come and breathe. And so we can do that all remotely before the humans even get there. And we can have stockpiles of rocket fuel and oxygen waiting for when the humans get there. So that is certainly a technology we have now, we can start working on, and hopefully we get there sooner rather than later. Right now, the US, we're trying to lead the effort to get there by the 2030s. And so it's not going to be somebody like me who's doing it. I'll be too old. It's going to be somebody like you who's here in school studying these types of things and following that dream of flying in space that's going to be doing that type of mission.
Very impressive. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Randolph, for your speech. So my question is, how did you feel during your stay in outer space? Was it scary or you was excited? And
I never really felt scared. There is I mentioned when we go out for the VKD, for the spacewalk, when you go to that big hole and there's nothing down and you have to crawl out, it's not so much a scared, it's just a natural reaction to that you're going to fall. And so that's probably the closest thing I had to being concerned about anything. But I just relied on my training that I had inside the swimming pool, all the practice I did to just reach out and just do what I'd always done, realize that I'm not going to fall. All the rest of the time, even when we're working or we're on an experiment, a tool floats away, it made us laugh. It was physically enjoyable to be free from gravity, to have to use our feet, to have to sit down in a chair. You could just sit there and just pull your feet up and just sit there and as if you're in a chair, but you're floating. It was comfortable to sleep in space because there was no blankets on you, and you weren't rolling on your side, and the pillow wasn't, you know, too little or too tall or too small. And so you're physically comfortable a lot more. And so you could see a little bit of the videos just playing around as we translated. It was really a physically enjoyable environment. And then we had the views that you saw that captivated our attention and what we were able to see.
Thank you, Randolph.
You're welcome. Five.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you for your speech. And as a student of aeronautics department, I would like you to ask about the perspectives of the future human space exploration programs. The questions about commercial spaceships and Mars colony were already asked, but I want to ask one more time, what is the next step after the International Space Station? Because as we know, it will be closed in the recent future. So what will we see next? Just commercial spaceships on the low Earth orbit or something more?
No, the hope is that the International Space Station has cost the Russian Space Agency, Japanese, European, Canadian, and U.S. space agencies almost $100 billion to assemble and operate. And we've been getting amazing science out of it in the 18 years that it's been up there and continuously manned. I imagine there's many of you in here who have never been alive a day where we didn't have humans in low Earth orbit, and that is wonderful to see. We are looking to transition it, perhaps, you know, in the middle of 2025 or so, to more commercial, where we can get companies to get involved, and you end up, you know, it's like having one building with several different companies on different floors. You know, why isn't that possible? Why doesn't that allow the government, the governments and space agencies who are footing the whole bill, to allow companies to go up there, pay some of the bill to keep it operational and do their science, or lease out or commercialize it. And then that frees up more money to go do the moon and Mars and beyond.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the speech, and I have one question that interesting, just only me. Did you have some fears that people on the Earth don't even imagine? Some fears? Do you have fears in the space? Except being lost in deep space and some.
Oh, fears about being lost in space?
No. Did you have any other fears that people on the Earth don't even imagine?
Any fears in space that people on the Earth don't have?
Don't imagine.
Not imagine. No, the dangers we faced were that we could have a piece of space debris hit the space station, cause a depressurization, or we could have a fire on the space station, or we could have a coolant leak from our cooling ammonia from the outside of the space station into the inside, which is toxic to people. Those were our biggest concerns. Could also have solar flares, create radiation concerns for us. Fortunately, during our mission, we didn't have any of those events. We trained to be able to put out a fire or close hatches to stop a depressurization. We trained a shelter in place for if we have a high radiation event. But those are about the only things that are outside of the normal from what we deal with down here.
Thanks.
All right. So that to be the final question.
Okay. Thank you for your speech. It was really encouraging, and I'm actually want to ask you for an advice for all those people who want to go someday to space or even other planets.
For those of you who find this interesting and find it motivating and perhaps inspirational, I was just like you. I watched, I saw the videos of Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. I saw, space shuttles go up in space. And I went to museums and I dreamed, you looked at that equipment and thought of what were the people thinking when they were in it. But I was in school and I studied mathematics. And then I went, in the university. And then I became a pilot and I learned how to fly. And then I became a test pilot. I had to learn how aerodynamics works and aerodynamic engineering. And so we have a wide variety of backgrounds between cosmonauts and astronauts. We've had geologists, astrophysicists, engineers, medical doctors, and all these types of people. And the one thing they have in common is not what they studied in school, but it was what they did with what they learned, and how much of a specialist and an expert they became when they were in their field. And then following that dream and passion they had, that's what shows up when they come down to interview as an astronaut. So my advice is to do well in school, learn all you can about everything you can, and then go apply it and enjoy and be passionate about what you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the director, if you would come up, I have some presents for your university.
May I please ask a question?
Okay. Крайний вопрос.
Good afternoon, Mr. Breznik. My name is Dmitry Shulzhenko, the Faculty of Linguistics. Thank you for your amazing speech. I'm glad that such country exists in the world as America, the country of dreamers, the country of scientists, which dreams of man's first step foot on Mars and the calling yonders of the universe. And I'm also glad that you cooperate with us Ukrainians. And it pleases me for the simple reason that very often we see around us anything but the aspirations of mankind. Do you remember what was written in popular Russian science magazines? Earth is the cradle of mankind, but we cannot live in the cradle forever. The quotation of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. One will step into the universe. The current generation will live under. Humanity will overcome growth diseases, cancer, diabetes, liver cirrhosis, heart attack, and whooping cough, and strive for a brighter future. And what do we see? At best, steady GDP growth, mysterious GDP, growth of investments and capitalization, and increase of EPSI rating. But it is in the best case. Usually the Russians have to deal with the worst one: downfall, decrease, recession. And what does it mean? No mankind actually aspires neither to Mars nor to the universe. At least not the Ruski Mir. Everyone can tell that over the last quarter of the century, the Russians have just been trying to sell to the world community the old Soviet technology and scheme, which were not even invented by them. Nowadays, they can only seem to come up with a scheme of withdrawal of money from the budget. I have no doubt that eventually one will set foot on the surface of Mars. The question is when and how, in your opinion, will he get there? And another question, what country will be this man a citizen of?
As I mentioned, the United States is trying to get the international partnership, whatever shape that is, by the 2030s to go to Mars. And it'll be a mission that'll be amazing for all of humanity to watch, just as the first step was on the moon. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. Randolph.
One question, please.
Excuse me.
One. Little one, it's so.
Okay, please. Go ahead.
Pale blue dot. Thank you for your speech. A pale blue dot. You saw our friendly ears from orbit. That you can tell people on Earth that they treat our house more attentively, that there is no sense in wars.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
There is no sense in wars on the ears. You saw our ears from the orbit. What can you say to people who live here? We should be more patient to each other, and there is no sense in wars.
As after spending 25 years in the United States Marine Corps, my goal and my hope was that I would never have to go to war. You know, the militaries of every country serve their nations as a deterrent for other countries from coming and harming their nation. You know, we all hope that we never have to go to war, and war is a terrible thing. And hopefully that any war that we see will be the last one in our lifetimes, but unfortunately human beings are not shown in our history that that's possible. To see Earth the way we've seen it and the way I showed you, where there are no borders, where there are no conflict, there's just a beautiful, peaceful little spaceship that we're all on. Like I said, we're working right now so that more people can see that, because I think once they do, they'll be better to themselves, to each other, and to our home planet. Thank you.
I want. Sorry.
Thank you. So I would like to present at this time a few items to the university. We have a poster from our crew from the Expedition 53. We have pictures of Kiev from space that I showed you, including a night picture.
Thank you very much.
A picture of the beautiful Ukrainian flag.
Thank you.
And then our mission patch and our mission sticker as a memory of today. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Randolph. Thank you. We will put these pictures to our museum. Thank you very much. And in memory of today's meeting, let me present you 3 lithographs. Pictured Sergei Korolev. This is a monument of Sergei Korolev at our campus. Vladimir Cholomey is a colleague of Sergei Korolev, who produced the proton missiles and many other technologies, and Igor Sikorsky. And also we have a small present to Wyatt. Please, okay. Thank you very much for very important and impressive meeting with our students. I am sure after this meeting, many from them will dedicate them activity to the investigation of space, maybe to colonizing of Mars, and some from them maybe will become the cosmonauts. Thank you very much. Thank you, and good luck to you.